Booktube, it's Janet, and today I've got my reading week wrap up, and it's my reading week's wrap up. I've been having ever such a lot of problems lately with my technology. My computer's just been having none of it lately, so I've been really struggling to get videos uploaded. Hopefully it's sorted now. That's why I've not really been around for a while, but I have been reading. And I've also had an awful summer cold. What's that all about? My daughter came home from university for a few days and left me with a cold that was vile and horrible. And yeah, I could have done without that as well. So I feel raring to go, back on my feet, and hopefully my technology is working so I can update you on some of the books that I've read recently. So the first one I've got to tell you about is Summertime, and this is by Vanessa LaFay, and this is set in the Florida Keys in 1935. Now apparently in 1935 there was one of the worst hurricanes ever to hit Florida that happened. Obviously because it's quite a while back, not that much is known about it, but it follows a very small community on one of the islands there. And it's very much class division and race division. So obviously you have the very wealthy white families, and the black people in that community tend to do manual jobs, service jobs, and those kind of things. It comes on the back of the First World War, where a lot of the veterans have returned from war, and the black veterans have come back to a displaced society. There isn't much for them. There obviously is no sort of understanding of PTSD in those days. They are quite lost. But a lot of these black veterans are working in the Florida Keys on building a road bridge that goes across, connecting all the islands. But basically the conditions that they're kept in are worse than prison conditions. But they do it because there isn't really anything else for them. And so you're following this community, and there is racial tension, but at the same time there is an attempt to bridge some gaps, and there are some racial tensions that tend to bubble under the surface. And so you follow the story of the build up to this hurricane that's coming in, and all the relationships between the people who live in this community. And there is an incident where the body of a white woman is found, and obviously the suspicion falls on one of the black workers. And then in the background to all this is the massive hit of this hurricane, which killed nearly all of the black workers that were in these camps. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's a fascinating piece of history that I didn't know anything about. It obviously isn't unfamiliar to me about the racial tensions that were in America, but obviously the impact of such segregation would have on your chances of survival of such a natural disaster as a hurricane. So you do, as you're reading it for the summer, you do feel the stickiness, the humidity, the heat, the foreboding sense of the hurricane coming in. So it's well worth a read. It was really, really good, really interesting, and I felt like I learned quite a lot. The next book I've got to tell you about is The Thoughts and Happenings of Wilfred Price, Purveyor of Superior Funerals, and this is by Wendy Jones. This is like a naked hardback, very pretty on the front and on the back. And this was kind of like, it was a nice read. It's set in a 1920s Welsh village. And Wilfred, he's quite a bashful kind of character. And somehow he ends up on a summer picnic, been taking this young girl out, Grace, for, you know, a couple of dates. He seems to be overcome with emotion of the time, the place, the sunny day of the picnic, and he proposes to Grace, and she accepts. And then very quickly afterwards, Wilfred realises, actually, I don't love this girl. I don't want to marry this girl. But Grace has got other ideas. She wants to marry Wilfred. Unfortunately, at the same time, Wilfred does actually meet his one, the girl of his dreams. And then you are in, although Wilfred does try to break it off with Grace, there are things and players in the background which are conspiring to, actually, Wilfred, you are going through with this. And there's a lot of the social restraints on people's freedom of the day, where there was an element of you will do things because it's deemed to be respectable, and you know, there will be no scandal and this is the way it should be. And I don't really want to tell you too much more about that. It's very charming. I think that the characterizations in this book are really warming. You do feel like you can see the life through Wilfred, and I did have so much sympathy for him as a character. And apparently, I don't know how many books there are going to be in the series, but there is another one, which I will definitely read, because it was a quick, light read, but also it tugged at my heartstrings in places. And yeah, it was a lovely read, and it was like really nice to read about this charming community. Next I've got to show you is the new and improved Romy Futch by Julia Elliott. And this is a book I had on my shelves for quite a long time, and I was really keen to read it. And you can see where my bookmark is, and up to this point I was kind of really enjoying it. And it's a little bit dystopian in a way, and there's a science facility and they're doing a lot of experimentation on the capacity of your brain. And so they round up volunteers who are social misfits, not really going anywhere in life, and Romy Futch is one of those people, and so he's really got nothing going for him, so he volunteers to take part in this science experiment. And what they do is they start to implant knowledge into your brain. And I thought, this is really interesting. I'm really keen to sort of get along with this. I'm really keen to see where the story goes. And the way Julia Elliott does this is that as you progress through the book, the language of the book is written through Romy Futch's kind of dialogue. So obviously at the beginning the language is quite simplistic, you're definitely sort of seeing his thoughts and feelings, but then as you progress and the knowledge is implanted in his brain, you start to get a massive shift in the language and the way the book's written, and to the point where I completely disengaged with it. I kind of see that the technique and the writing was to illustrate how Romy himself was developing. I just sort of started to feel that Julia Elliott was showing off a little bit, that she'd read all this deep philosophical work and writing, and it just became overinflated, like almost like a bit of pontification, and I completely lost the track of the story and disengaged with it. And so I got this far and I DNF'd it, and it was such a shame because I really would like to see where the story led. The story then became out of my reach because of the language and the references to, you know, high philosophical concepts, which, you know, I'm not stupid, but they mean nothing to me. I know nothing about them. So I lost my way with it, and I disengaged, and so I ended up DNFing it, and it was a shame because it was a book that I'd really been looking forward to. And the next book I've got to show you is Bonemeal Therosis by Miranda Sherry, and this, if you can just see, the cover is absolutely gorgeous. I loved this book. It's the first book I've ever read that is written by a South African author, and it's set in South Africa, so I absolutely love that experience of seeing life through our characters' eyes in a different part of the world that I really don't know much about. And it starts off where Poppy is our narrator, and she's a young child, and you very quickly start to realise that she's in a very, very precarious home situation. Her mother's a chaotic drug user, and she is quite transient in the people that she's hanging out with and living with, and obviously Poppy's needs are just nowhere on the spectrum at all. Obviously, as a mother and a human being, you are quite concerned for Poppy, and you're just hoping beyond hope that there is a good outcome for Poppy. And I'm not giving anything away, but basically Poppy's grandfather finds out about her existence. He didn't even know that she was living, and he comes and he rescues her from the situation, and he takes her to live with him and her grandmother in quite a small community that's very agricultural. And obviously Poppy is quite withdrawn. She's obviously very damaged by the experience of living with her mother, and over time and love and care, she starts to assert herself as an individual in her own right, and she chooses to change her name because she doesn't want to identify with Poppy, the abused child. She flourishes through the love of nature and gardening, the things that she's learning with her grandparents. She then starts to develop where she goes to the local school and makes friends, but she's always still quite a distant character. There are a few events that happen along the way that trigger some sort of change in her existence. She's always terrified that her mother's going to come back, which you can understand, and she's never really come to terms with it or thought about it or talked about it. And then as she develops into adulthood, she develops a relationship with a married neighbour, and this relationship with the married neighbour starts to then cause her to unravel a little bit. I absolutely loved it. It's a really good read. It's fabulous for a summer read because obviously it's, you know, set in a different country and sunnier climes, so I thoroughly recommend that one. So that's what I've been reading so far. Let me know if you've read any of these or what you think, and I will see you all soon. Keep reading. Bye.